Hello, everyone. In this week's episode of the Tonic Accord, we will be discussing the issues regarding mass shootings in relation to the recent shootings in Dayton, Ohio, El Paso, Texas, and Gilroy, California. Not the most fun of topics, but a very, very important one and kind of a scary one. Alex, how you doing this week?
Doing great, Drew. Obviously, news-wise, it's probably been one of the worst weeks, not only in Trump's presidency, but in a while, I would say. But, I'm doing great. Summer is winding down, going back to Spain soon and everything. But, yeah, I was thinking, I don't know, last week, right after we got done with our last episode on deplatforming, I saw, that was when all these events happened, and I was just like, we really need to talk about guns. It's just continuously an issue that we're facing, and I've just heard arguments left and right, back and forth, and I think there's merits to a lot of things everyone is saying right now. I'm someone that enjoys shooting. I've gone hunting a few times. I understand the merits of hunting and being able to own and operate a rifle, but I just think we don't seem to understand that we need to limit the access,
Yeah, it's like this has been such a recurring topic, and I feel like people put it aside after a while, and then a new round of mass shootings happens, and it goes right back to the forefront. But I don't know if this time feels different or not, but hopefully this time America as a whole can decide to do something about it. I personally have also enjoyed, recreational shooting. I usually have done it with handguns. And like I'm at the point now where it's like, we have to be willing to give up some freedoms for some better sense of security because it's just gotten ridiculous. So, let's start looking at the context of these specific shootings, and then we can go from there as far as how it relates to possible policy to address it. So the big one, unfortunately, was El Paso, and that was where the lone gunman killed 22 people and injured 24 others in a Walmart. And this the FBI is currently investigating it as an act of domestic terrorism and possibly a hate crime. And so we have a couple angles that we have to discuss, right? One is the motives of the shooter, which we'll get into, but first let's talk a little bit about the weapons since we just brought that up. He was using a WASR-10 rifle, which is a semi-automatic civilian version of the AK-47, and these are legal in the state of Texas, and that's what he used, and he killed 22 people and injured dozens more. So we have to wonder, right? So the first thing I think many people see is the images of him holding an AK, and you wonder how is it legal to have an AK-47 in the United States, even if it's the semi-automatic civilian version? And what kind of things can we do so that we don't get a gun like this in the hands of someone this unstable?
Right. And I mean, I want to not push back on anything you said, because it's all correct. But we do have to distinguish, because I think a lot of non-gun owning people, more so on the left, probably urban people, do they kind of just see that AK or the AR-15 and they assume it's just a military grade rifle, and just because it looks like an AK does not mean it fires in the same way as an AK. But obviously, just that image alone is powerful and disturbing, right? And I mean, still a semi-automatic rifle. The Economist had a good point. They were basically saying that police were actually in the location, in the vicinity of this Walmart. But when you have a gun that can fire off 50 to 100 rounds in less than a minute, and you can kill 20 people in less than a minute, you could have the whole military outside, but it's not going to do much. You know what I mean? And that's just, I don't think that's acceptable. We shouldn't have the access to a weapon with that many shots possible. I mean, who needs that? I don't know any hunters. I don't know any people for home protection that would ever need to use that many bullets unless it's for actually singling out and killing a bunch of people.
Right. So for anyone that doesn't know, because we do want to make sure we have the exact details about the weapons correct for gun owners and non-gun owners. Semi-automatic means that every time you fire a bullet, you have to press down the trigger again. So it's you press it down, a bullet fires. You press it down, a bullet fires. It's not where you hold it down and it goes, blah, 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 blah. That's automatic. This is semi-automatic, but still, even with semi-automatic fire, you can get down, right, like you said, 60 to 100 rounds per minute?
Yeah, depending on the magazine, but yes.
Right, and so then that's the next thing is the magazine. Trying to see if he has. I mean, I know for a fact that there is not a high capacity magazine ban in Texas. We're trying to find out if the shooter had a high magazine.
The one in Dayton did, I believe.
Right, he had a 100-round drum.
Right, which is insane, by the way. But I mean, and really quick, I wanted to just bounce off this statistic, which is staggering and unacceptable, in my opinion. The Gun Violence Archive said that on average, this year has seen one shooting in which 4 or more people were killed or injured every day. And there has been 31 shootings with 3 or more deaths in 2019 already. That's just insane.
That is insane. It's one of those things, right, where it's like, when I walk around the street, I can't, like, I have to remind myself, it's almost improbable it's going to happen. I can't run around my life in fear all the time. But hearing statistics like that, it does make you wonder, wow, this is like a really huge issue, and this kind of pattern does not show up in other countries like this. And
right.
It makes it, and so everyone's probably confused and wondering what's the panacea. I don't think there is a one panacea, but we obviously have to attack it from multiple angles. The first of which is being access to deadly weapons. And I think, we were talking about the size of the magazine. I think the high capacity magazine ban should be adopted by more states. Right now it's
Completely.
only 9 states and then Washington D.C. have high capacity magazine restrictions in one form or another. I think that should be adopted more commonly and have maybe 10 to 15 rounds maximum. I mean, for sports shooting, right? You don't need more than 10 rounds for sport shooting or for home defense.
No, and I mean, but see, and so this is the criticism I hear, and kind of the critique on the right is that, so I mean, there are a decent amount of Democratic Congress people and senators that want to just outlaw semi-automatic weapons, and the problem is that there's a very large amount of weapons that are deemed semi-automatic. You know what I mean? So I think, like you said, going for a magazine is a much better way to do it because, for example, pistols are semi-automatic, right? And so does that mean we need to outlaw pistols as well, or do we just look at the magazine side? Unfortunately, I think that no one is on the same page on the left as well as the right on this issue. It's like everyone's throwing out different ideas, and unfortunately, I think a lot of it is out of emotion half the time. Because no one wants to see our kids and loved ones getting shot up on the streets, but unfortunately everyone's throwing out such different options for this.
Yeah. And you also have to wonder what's politically feasible. And unfortunately, some ideas are just going to be dead in the water.
Right.
But wide sweeping bans. I mean, we had an assault rifle ban from 94 to 2004. For 10 years. Now then the law was supposed to get renewed and it wasn't. So perhaps maybe, so the assault style is the pistol grip, but with a semi-automatic rifle and a stock, right? Whereas the hunting rifle style there's no pistol grip. It's like a wooden or, carbon fiber, but it's not a pistol grip. It's a rifle grip. So there's distinctions there. And then a lot of hunting rifles are bolt action where you have to pull the bolt back and pull all forward every shot. I've had interesting ideas. I believe it's either Denmark or Finland where they have sports shooting culture, but the military style weapons cannot leave the gun ranges, so no one can own them and take them home. It's like a kind of thing where you can own a hunting rifle, and then if you go use the assault style weapons, you go to a range and you can sport shoot that there. I thought that was an interesting thing. Perhaps maybe you could apply some of that idea to the United States, where, if you did want to have fire weapons over 10 rounds in a magazine, you would have to just go to the range and they stay at the range, right? And of course, every shooting range would be registered with the state, Everyone keeps track.
Right.
Everyone keeps track of everything coming in and out of a shooting range. But you could have like the biggest, meanest, for people that are enthusiasts, the funnest guns, to put it bluntly, you just keep those at the range, and then so you can't take home a squad automatic weapon or something like that. But then you can.
I think that's a very good point.
But you still have the enthusiast with the ability to engage in the sport.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and personal defense would be the realms of shotguns, semi-automatic pistols, hunting rifles, and sort of the less massacre able weapons.
That's a really good point. And that kind of makes me want to jump into the Council on Foreign Relations. Actually, just recently did a interesting comparative analysis over the United States, Canada, Australia, Israel, the United Kingdom, and Japan, kind of talking about this exact issue. And I just want to say, I think it's a misnomer that a lot of people think that other countries have banned all their guns. You know what I mean? Like, if you talk to a pretty progressive person in the United States who wants to just somehow either buy back or take away the guns, like, what was his name? Eric Swalwell, for example, was pushing for that. A lot of people don't recognize that actually a lot of the world does have guns. They've just learned from their mistakes and have made it much more difficult. Like Canada, they've divided their weapons into 3 classes. Non-restricted weapons, such as ordinary rifles and shotguns, like you were saying, and then restricted, such as handguns and semi-automatic rifles, and then prohibited automatic weapons. And so depending on the situation in the class, there are different ways in which to get a weapon.
Right.
And then in Australia, the National Agreement on Firearms all but prohibited automatic and semi-automatic assault rifles, mandated licensing and registration, and instituted a temporary gun buyback program that took some 650,000 assault rifles out of circulation. In Israel, it's a different case, because military service is compulsory. So everyone does have specific training with weapons. So I think people are going to be just naturally more responsible because the military weeds out people that are unstable and they get them psychological help. So those people just are not going to have guns. And in the United Kingdom, they also did a buyback program after a shooting in the Scottish town of Dunblane in 1996. And Japan has highly restrictive firearm regulations, probably like Sweden and Finland. But also the interesting thing with them is they have a low homicide rate in general. So there's less of a need for people to buy guns for protection. But basically, under their firearm and sword law, the only guns permitted are shotguns, air guns, and guns with specific research or industrial purpose. So, I guess the point I'm trying to highlight right here is that every other country, I'm not going to say every other country, but a large amount of countries do allow weapons to be in circulation. But they've just realized after some form of a mass shooting or violence that we should just limit the access. You know what I mean? It just comes back to that.
Yeah, and have really, reality-based regulation on it.
Right. And I don't think it's that difficult. It's just the problem is, myself being a moderate Republican, it's something I've never understood about the Republicans is that they are just so deeply in the pocket of the NRA that they just don't want to stand up to any of it.
Right. That's the problem, right? So I feel like the narrative is getting pushed that one side wants to take your guns away, so that the only thing you have to do is to block any, it's the slippery slope thing. It's the slippery slope, right? It's like, well, if they start with now, it's a slippery slope till eventually you have no guns. And
right.
Frankly, we have to remember that the Constitution protects that. The Constitution protects, the right to bear arms. But that doesn't mean you have a right to, bear a 100-round drum mag on a semi-automatic rifle. So it's like, I don't know, people get wrapped up in this notion that you can't give any ground. And that's what the NRA's view is. The NRA is don't give any ground, right? Fight every little regulation on weapons, on firearms. And it's like, you guys, we have to give up some ground right now. We can't have someone having an AR-15 firing 223 rounds out of a 100-round drum mag and have that all be bought legally in the state of Ohio. That's crazy. And then and it doesn't have to mean that the government busts down your door and takes your guns to get there. We can make serious middle ground progress and real regulation, right? So the other one is the gun shows, where you have to go through comprehensive background checks at most firearm stores, right? Licensed firearm stores. You do get background checked, and you have to prove everything. But at a gun show, that's not necessarily the case.
It's a
And
good point.
so like that's the gun show loophole is another area where states and if not the federal government, then individual states really have to crack down on.
Yeah, I mean, on that, I think it's, I mean, yeah, kind of going off this gun show loophole and the legal access to guns is the fact that between 1982 and 2019, I have a graph in front of me that looks at if the weapon was illegal or illegally obtained that was involved in the mass shootings, and 81 of the weapons were legally obtained and only 16 were illegally obtained for these shootings. And I think that's another Republican talking point is, well, guns are always going to be there. If you get rid of them, there's people can still get them illegally, which is true. I mean, gang violence in cities like Chicago and Baltimore is extremely high, and obviously they're not probably getting a lot of those guns at a vendor, right? But I think it is shocking that of the mass shootings, 81 of them were, I guess, provided to by a legally accessed weapon. So it's not illegal weapons. It is the fact that people are getting them legally.
Yeah, I mean, like that argument that guns will always be there. Sure, it'll still be possible for people to go out of their way to buy an illegal firearm, but it'll be more difficult. That's the whole point. Is like, yeah, I don't think we're ever gonna get rid of guns existing on this planet. I mean, that's just reality. It's just like drugs. But some fights are worth fighting. Some drugs like heroin and meth are worth keeping illegal, right? It's not like, oh well, you can't do anything about it, so just let it be legal. Like that's not necessarily the solution. There
No.
are and the other ways to combat it, right? And so this is also brings us to kind of like the second part of this discussion is like has access to guns, who is the person buying the weapon, and is there a way to prevent people that are either considered hateful, right, to have like committed hate crimes, or those that are mentally unstable? How do we prevent them from getting access to a weapon in the first place?
Well, yeah, and I think the big, actually semi-bipartisan issue, or not issue, policy that is being talked about right now are, these red flag laws, which, 17 states plus DC have. Many of these laws basically, look to law enforcement looking for basically red flags, looking for someone that has concerning either things they've said, concerning actions, family members that are concerned. And I think the big idea is that family like they're going to look into families and friends and communities and hope that a lot of people can reach out about someone that shouldn't have a firearm. And then also the intelligence community, the police departments, etc., can also support this. And Lindsey Graham and, oh my God, I'm going to butcher his name, Richard Blumenthal, that's a Democrat and a Republican, are working on passing one of these. But I don't know if the red flag bills are going to be a fix-all, because a lot of studies show that so far it's really hard to see. They have helped with suicides, which is interesting. There is a lot of information. The Pew Institute and NPR came out saying that it is true that suicides have decreased. Let's see. Research in Connecticut and Indiana found that for every 10 to 20 confiscations under the laws, there was one fewer death from suicide. So, I mean, I guess on that side of it, these are nice. But then there's also a worry of overreacting to these red flag laws. And the big argument that a lot of conservatives use, and I think it's not awful, is that what if I don't know, I have someone that lives next door that I don't get along with, right? And I've told them to their face, oh, I hate you, or I wish you were dead, or go F yourself, or something. Or I post on social media, oh, I hate my neighbor, wish that guy wasn't around. Just because I have the anger towards a neighbor or someone and say I own a weapon, does it constitute my weapon being taken away? And it comes down to intent. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, intent is always so hard to prove in any kind of right in the court of law. It's always like the most like anytime you're like, oh, I didn't intend to do that, or you intended to harm this person via slander. No, I just had misinformation. Right? It's hard to prove stuff like that. And I don't think perhaps the severity can lead not to like a full punishment of like, oh, okay, well there goes your weapon privileges. Like if you post something like, I wish my neighbor weren't around anymore. maybe you just get a knock on the well, I don't know. It's tough. It's tough, but I do think that there is definitely instances where it's a little less gray, where we have to have the ability for law enforcement to step in, right?
Yeah.
Like if someone posts, a manifesto. Now, in this case, the manifesto was posted only a few minutes before the shooting started, so it's not like anything really could have been done anyway. But if you have someone that's like posting online that like, I wish someone would shoot up Mexicans or something like that, and there's a repeated, a pattern. I think we do have to maybe give up some freedoms to make sure that law enforcement can get ahead of that. Like, I don't know. It's like I don't want a 1984 police state either, but I also want to make sure that people that have it in their heart to commit massacres are able to be tracked and stopped by law enforcement. Like, I'm willing to give up some internet freedoms if it means people that really want to commit terrorism are caught.
Right.
I think it's like, this is like a lot of people felt that way after 2001, and now, we can look back and probably say some of the freedoms we gave up for securities may have gone too far. But perhaps we're at another point in our American culture where, we've come to that crossroad again of how much freedom we're willing to give up for more security. And I feel like most people are willing to give up some more freedoms right now.
Oh, completely. Yeah, I mean, I think that 8 and 10, oh, I don't think this, I have the number in front of me. 8 and 10 Democrats and Democratic leaning independents say gun laws should be stricter. And 79% of Republicans favor stronger background checks. So, everyone has identified the issue, I think.
Yeah.
It's just the politics and this unfortunate political landscape we're in have just muddled the waters so much,
Right, absolutely. Well, I mean, it seems like the House is more willing to be bipartisan on this, right? So you mentioned,
yes,
and that's great to see. It just, we'll have to see if it gets past the Senate, and the Senate, the Senate usually is like this, but the Senate is slow to move and not easily swayed by the quick reactions, right?
right.
Sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I want to bounce an idea off you, which one of my friends who works in politics always told me was a idea that no one talks about, but maybe should be more, is what do you think about trying to pass an amendment? Because obviously the Second Amendment is, pretty much taken the heart and soul of gun-owning conservatives and I guess some liberals as well. And what do you think about trying to pass an amendment that changes not the Second Amendment in full, but maybe parts or aspects of it?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what that would be, right? I'd have to think about what that would be.
Oh, totally. It's just hypothetical. I guess, yeah, you're right.
But hypothetically, right, I think, we do have to remember that our Constitution can be amended, right? I don't think the founding fathers meant for things to be set in stone. I think they left the process of amending and checks and balances is that so we don't have to always fall into rigid traditionalism, right? We should be able to mend our laws and go and adapt to the times. So yeah, I mean, look, but an amendment, especially an amendment, right, not against, but changing the notion of the Second Amendment, there would be such an immense battle against it, right? The NRA would throw every penny against that cause. So, again, it's like, right, it comes back to like Nancy Pelosi's thinking, which is what crusades are worth going for and what are not, based on just like the political realities. Like because you have to think about the optics and like, is some progress better than none, or do you go, all out and go for double or nothing? I don't think double or nothing is the right answer. So I don't know if I would go as far as a full-on amendment. But,
good point.
But bipartisan legislation is like, good faith bipartisan legislation is the best way. We're seeing it in the House and we're not seeing it in the Senate.
Right. I think that's an astute point, and I kind of now want to move over to the other part of these recent shootings, considering you had the synagogue shooting, was that October, November, I think? Mm-hmm. The bombs being sent to prominent Democratic leaders, the shootings. Is that I think we need to discuss the political landscape right now. That involves the president, this growing white supremacy problem, domestic terrorism, because I think that I think every issue currently in the United States is interconnected. The fact that we have a border crisis, Trump's election, the opioid crisis. I'm sorry, I'm going all crazy here, and the shooting problem. I think that everything right now is connected. And The Economist has a quick 2 sentences I just want to say is that America's biggest mass shootings come in patterns. In the 1980s, there was a wave of post office shootings. Later, shootings at schools and universities became a way for a certain type of young man to achieve fame. More recently, there has been an increase in acts of terrorism perpetuated by white men who believe they are locked in a struggle against non-whites and Jews. And I think what I'm trying to get at is that there's a common denominator in all of these. It's young to middle-aged white men who feel like they've lost their purpose.
Yeah, I mean it's the white genocide theory, right? It's
Right.
It's the belief that there is an active attempt to breed out the white man and to disenfranchise the white man, which I don't think is true. But this is what these young men are believing, right? They think that it's anti-immigrant, it's very anti-immigrant, it's very pro-white, it's a white nationalism, and it's targeted against Jews, against Muslims, and against right now. I mean, the El Paso shooting. The guy says it himself. He says, when investigators were talking to him after the shooting, he says, "I wanted to shoot as many Mexicans as I could." So, and it's the idea that he feels that his identity is being threatened.
Very, very well said. Yeah.
And
Also, sorry, go ahead. My bad.
well, I know it's just one of those tough things, right? Because it's like, I feel like a lot of people like to shrug off, like, oh, racism is something of the past, and racism is something that, like, it's just your old grandpa or your old uncle that, like, he's racist, but young people aren't racist. It's like, no, I mean, we're seeing it active and alive today, like young people that are caught up in some kind of propaganda online can become violent racists.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I mean, I totally agree. I think it is this lost. I mean, yeah, like you said, the white genocide, the Great Replacement, which is kind of an evolved version of the white genocide idea, but also I think we do tend to over politicize this because Trump's responsible, according to some, for El Paso. Oh, but it was a left Elizabeth Warren supporter that did Dayton, and it's like I think we're missing the root of the issue. Is that if you're lost and angry, it doesn't matter if you're a racist or an anti-fascist or whatever it may be. You found some sort of extreme outlet and you want to perpetuate violence against the other, right? Like, so the guy in Dayton was an Antifa minded. I'm not going to say he was part of Antifa, but he, said, let's kill the cops. Let's start another. I don't want to be misquoted, so I'm just going to say, but yeah, he was talking about shooting cops and stuff. And the Dayton and the El Paso guy was super anti-Mexican, anti-immigration. And I think the root of both of these is that America, for a long time has been this beacon on the hill, this place where everyone thinks they can rise up with their boots and make a life for themselves. And I think as globalization has changed everything, the world's becoming less white and we don't look like each other as much. I think that a lot of people just kind of feel like the world's left them behind, and then they go online and get radicalized, And I think that's a lot of why Trump still speaks to this group, and his rhetoric is awful, talking about infestations and everything. But I think it picks a bone with a lot of people who just truly feel like this great country of ours, isn't quite as great anymore just because the world is changing.
Right, but okay, the world is changing, right? But their hatred is addressed at the wrong thing. We've talked about this, right? About like the automation. Automation is killing way more jobs than immigrants are, but people are blaming immigrants, and people are uncomfortable with like race mixing, and right, like the white identity is being weeded out. It's misguided anxiety. I mean, there's a lot of anxiety with globalization and the future we see. But people are misguiding their anxiety towards racial hatred, and this is what's happening. And I think it's not like this. It's not like everything was good and then Trump came along and then now this exists. No, Trump is just utilizing the anxieties that have been in America forever. There has always been people that view whites as their own identity and the superior identity, and they don't want it to change, and that can manifest into hating others, and it often does. And that's always been there, and it's just Trump now is just telling the people that, right, like he's saying things like infestation, and these little words will ring true to people's heads. So he's utilizing hate that's already been there, bubbling underneath the surface, for the last decade before.
Astute point. Very good point.
So yeah, when someone says, Trump did, Trump's fault El Paso, I don't buy that. I think he's just stoking the fires for his own personal gain. But man, these attitudes that people have held have always been there before Trump ever came around.
Right. But I do think that things are getting worse, much worse, and I don't know if it's it's a chicken or the egg. Is it social media or is it this multicultural world we live in? But I would truly argue that, I love multiculturalism. I live in Europe half the year. I love meeting new people and everything, and I think it's better. But unfortunately, I think Fox News and Trump have perpetuated this, and Fox News has been doing it for a long time. I think Trump is just a symptom of the problem. But Fox News, Tucker Carlson, who I really think is too much. He talks. For a while, he was sympathizing with, South African whites who were getting their land taken by Africans. And now he's talking about how it's a hoax, that there's a white supremacy problem in the United States, and they're always, I don't know. It's just that revolving door of Trump and Fox News, where it comes back to intent. I still don't think Trump is a racist. And I know that's not a popular opinion. I think he just supports anyone that supports him. And unfortunately, a lot of people that support him are fine with turning a blind eye on these issues. And he doesn't want to speak out against them because he wants their vote and he likes that support. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, yeah. As far as Trump goes, I think he's a pure narcissist. I don't think he has an idealistic bone in his body. So yeah, he just sees it as politically advantageous to start spewing stuff like build the wall or letting the people chant "send her back" because he just likes when people chant stuff at him.
Right.
But yeah, but like that, right? He didn't say send her back, but he let the people chant, and then he went on like, oh well, I couldn't do anything to stop it. And it's like, he knows exactly what he's doing, and he's using it for gain. But the reality is there are people that are being killed because of this rhetoric, and it's just crazy that. Well, it's just crazy that it's we still have to deal with this stuff. But I guess the reality is I had one of my professors at college said, handling hatred and racism is like mowing the grass. Like it's a continual thing. It's not like it's something of the past that's done and you don't have to worry about it anymore. There will always be cultural clash and tribalistic views of people. We're the we and they're the them. Of one way or another, and it's like you have to mow the grass. You have to continually and actively combat that to create a better society.
That's an amazing quote. You should get that. He should get that patented or something. I don't know, copyrighted.
Gotta mow the grass. Gotta mow the grass. Sunday comes around. Gotta mow the grass.
And I think that sums it up well. Politically, you don't have to agree with George W. Bush or Obama, but after 9/11, Bush went to a mosque.
You're right. Exactly.
Obama always spoke up against racism, and he really tried to help the soul of America. But like you said, Trump's a narcissist. He only seems to care about himself. Why did he go to the effing hospital in El Paso and just start spewing off how big his crowd was and how bad Beto O'Rourke is and how phony the news is? Be presidential, man, for God's sake.
Yeah, for God's sakes, be presidential, right? Or John McCain when he was campaigning against Obama, someone was like, Obama's a Muslim. He's from the Middle East. And McCain was like, no, like, I'm going to take the time to correct you. Like, that's not how we handle this. And that's not how we should handle this in this country. He's a man I don't agree with, but that's it. He's an American, and we both want the better for our country. Right? That kind of mutual respect that I think, like you said, like a George Bush or John McCain had. I just don't see it in Trump, and I just don't see it in the current political discourse at all.
Yeah. It just really does come back to that, is we're just so divided, and everyone's in their trenches again. Back to, every issue, every week we talk about the trenches. It's like we're in just this kind of political cold war inside of our own country. I'm not going to call it a civil war because that isn't true.
No,
But
I don't want to. Yeah, I absolutely don't want to be stoking any. Right, like we're definitely not in a civil war, and that's the last thing anyone wants. Who was it? Alex Jones was the one saying that, right? He was like, prepare for the civil war. Liberals want a civil war. Um, yeah, that's yeah. No, but I definitely feel the Cold War aspect. You know, some people I talk to people all the time that they say like, oh, I used to have a friend on Facebook, and then we started talking politics, and now I don't talk to them anymore. And that's such a shame to me that it's like, wow, like people are really losing friends over just who's president.
and I mean, I guess this always went on, but it's worse now.
Yeah,
And I think it's because Trump. I mean, I don't want to get too much into him, but Trump is just. I think he's just so unlikable, honestly, visually and with his actions, that it's so much easier for people to be repulsed by him. And then when he says stuff like this, because I mean, honestly, policy wise, his actions aside, he hasn't done anything that much crazier than most Republicans, other than the trade war. Um, and I think it's just the fact he's so repulsive, and just no one really, Democrats don't want him so much, that I think that, I mean, I see it more on the left than the right, is that a lot of Democrats don't want anything to do with anyone that supports Trump. And I think that is a dangerous
yeah, I've definitely seen
road.
that. I've definitely seen that in action, and it's a shame. I wish people would be willing to talk to each other. Again, it's a little off topic, but like I have seen that. Like we talk about the entrenching, right? I saw one where it was like, Midwest farmers are getting hit the hardest by Trump's trade war, and I remember seeing just the comments underneath that online, and they were like, good, this is what those farmers get for voting Trump. Like, yeah, you make your bed, you sleep in it. And I was like, what? No, these are your fellow Americans that are suffering because of a trade war that they didn't realize was going to happen. They didn't know it was going to go down like this, right? And it's like, even if they voted for Trump and you didn't, they're still your fellow Americans. We should want the best for each other. And so I've
Yeah.
seen it. I've seen the vitriol come out of people's mouths just because, well, if you were a Trump supporter at any time, then you deserve to be whatever. And it's like, no, God, no. We have to come together as a country. And I think this time right now, after these attacks and after we've seen so many of these shootings, we have to come together as a country and to pass background checks and ban high capacity magazines and really look at what freedoms can we do without to make our streets safer. Because think about this, right? A lot of people talk about we need, like, Sean Hannity on Fox News talked about putting an armed guard at every mall and every school, and we forget that the Dayton one was the police were there and they shot him. They got the shooter down within a minute, but he was still able to kill 10 people and injure 27 others. So obviously having armed guards at the scene, like you said with Walmart, they were outside. That's not enough to stop these shootings.
Exactly. I mean, when you have 50 to 100 bullets, I mean, yeah, they can send the police, but by the time they find you, I mean, you're going to have a lot of damage to do, And I mean, like you were talking about, it's a time to come together, I mean, there are positives. I mean, what's his name? Mike Turner, the GOP representative of Dayton, Ohio. He got, I think, an A+ from the NRA. And now he is one of many people who said that he will support legislation that prevents the sale of military-style weapons. Yeah, I mean, there's positivity, and I think the problem, again, is that the issues are coming from the executive branch. The issues are coming from the executive branch in this. I still believe that most Republicans do not really deep down like Trump or what he's doing, and we see it sometimes. We see little glimpses of it. And it is nice to see that there is a discussion, at least, about these red flag laws and limiting these military style weapons.
Yeah, I hope it passes. I hope, because I see it too, right? Like I definitely see Republicans calling for some kind of action. It's not totally one-sided, but I think a lot of it's going to come down to, the Senate, and then as well as the executive branch in pushing it through.
Yes.
Who gets calls from the NRA and how long are those calls? Yeah,
Yes.
It's a shame. It's a shame that one organization or any one organization in general can have so much sway over what should be a bipartisan effort and movement.
Yeah. The Economist had a scary quote. It was, mass shootings in America have become like deforestation in Brazil or air pollution in China, a man-made hazard that is hard to stop.
Yeah, and ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? and unfortunately, and I hope to God I'm wrong, but I have a feeling this topic will come up again in a matter of months or a year. It's gonna die down and it'll come up again. So
Yeah.
hopefully,
Yes, it's really a
hopefully,
shame.
hopefully the cycle breaks, and hopefully some bipartisan legislation can do that. But for the time being, it's like another standstill again.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunate, and we do, again, back to the executive branch, we do need to recognize that domestic terror from mainly white supremacists is a big deal. Christopher Wray, the FBI director, warned about it. But a lot of former counterintelligence analysts say that the government, especially the executive branch, does not devote nearly as much energy to understanding domestic terrorism.
Right.
And that's a big issue.
Right. Absolutely. It's not. It should not be party related. Right. Anyone that's willing to take a gun for any political motive or for racial hatred, that should just be immediately a priority for anyone to
Yeah,
eradicate that kind of behavior.
completely agree. Completely agree. Well, I don't know if you have any other ideas, but I think I think we went pretty well into that for the time space we have. But I mean, on a side note, it's been a week of a lot of headlines outside of the shooting and the re-emerging gun debate, such as Mr. Jeffrey Epstein, suicide in a New York prison. There's some controversy coming out around it. Attorney General William Barr has even said they are going to look into it. It was deemed a suicide, but there is I don't know where I stand on it, but there are people that do think that this could have been foul play to stop Epstein from speaking up about the amount of powerful people that have underage sex with minors.
Yeah, I hate to sound like I got a tinfoil hat on, but it's just really sketchy to me, really smelly to me that like someone who's on suicide watch and everyone understands is a suicide risk somehow is able and has no access to means of suicide, right? Like they don't even give you a butter knife for food. Somehow is able to kill himself. Man, I'm glad they are looking into it, right? Like, I'm glad that AG Barr wants to look into it. Some other congressmen and women have voiced concerns over the legitimacy of the report that it's a suicide. So I definitely think they should look into it. I mean, look, he obviously had motive to kill himself. Like that's established. But there's also a lot of motive for someone else to have him killed, or to assist him in the suicide, right? Someone providing him the means. So I don't know if I was any one of those prison guards or the jail guards in that area on duty that night, I would be waiting by the phone for that call because man, that's where I would go. Is I'd go to all those prison guards and be like, where were you? What did you have in your pocket, right? Because it just looks so sketch because he has so much information to spill about people. Like we don't know how deep this rabbit hole goes, and then boom. The loose ends are tied just like that. How convenient.
Right. And I mean, from day one, this case, from day one, from the prosecution to every other aspect of it, this case has been handled sketchily and murky. And I do think that, if there was incentive to do foul play to him and to actually not prosecute this case correctly, that makes sense because this could bring down a lot of powerful people, and I don't know if Epstein was going to talk, but it does bring up some serious questions about what power people do. And I know a lot of people say, like, where did Epstein get all this money? Was he running almost an extortion, blackmail pyramid scheme involving powerful people and underage sex? There's a lot of things, and unfortunately now, I don't know if we're ever going to know.
Crazy stuff, man. Crazy stuff. When I saw that he was had killed himself, I saw the headline. I was like not shocked, but I was like, wow. Like I knew something like that. I don't know. This is just so sketch, man. Just so sketch and so like dark and sad and like like a gross thing to think about in general. Like that whole, I don't know. It's just like someone's gonna make a movie about this eventually, but man. Like what a abysmal thing to do. Like his life, man, his whole life was just being an absolute scumbag and prostituting children and then he died and he killed himself in a jail cell. Like, what a waste of life.
And he sounded like, I mean, I'm gonna get pushed back from this, but he sounded like a guy that, I mean, he never married, never had kids, and just worked. So probably a smart guy, but obviously some really disturbing demons.
Yeah, there's a lot of smart but very, very, very unethical people out there.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I don't know. I don't know what else has happened in the news this week, but that Epstein thing, you're right. It really did get me off guard. I also got kind of chills when I got that notification.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see how deep the rabbit hole goes, if we'll ever get to go deeper in the rabbit hole. But man, it's just creepy to think. It's just creepy to think about in general. All right, with that, guys, if you have any comments, leave them in the comments of whatever platform you're listening on. Please subscribe to our Podbean, follow us on Podbean, subscribe to the YouTube. And we do read the comments, and we would love to hear back from you guys. And we will continue to be uploading the weekly schedule.
Perfect, guys. Keep talking to one another. And yeah, we'll see you here next week.
Take care.